Welcome to another program in the CSEC Circle. Today we are going to be discussing the poem South by Edward Kamau Brathwaite. I am Winnell Yearwood. To my left is Faith Richards, and to my right is Dexter Johnson. Have you ever traveled, but in the midst of your holiday felt homesick? Do you know persons who have immigrated to Europe, North America, usually to make a better life? What has been their experience? We tend to take our life in the Caribbean for granted. Many people have migrated to North America, to Europe, in order to make a better life. But many of them have sacrificed their own happiness in order to make that better life. In this poem, the persona has clearly emigrated to several different countries in the North. But it is clear from his description that he has not enjoyed his time there and that he longs to return to the warmth of the place he knows best, and that is the Caribbean. The poem has a very interesting title, though. It's just called South.
South by Kamau Brathwaite. But today I recapture the island's bright beaches, blue mist from the ocean rolling into the fishermen's houses. By these shores I was born. Sound of the sea came in at my window. Life heaved and breathed in me then with the strength of that turbulent soil. Since then I have traveled, moved far from the beaches, sojourned in stonier cities, walking the lands of the north in sharp, slanting sleet and the hail, crossed countless saltless savannas, and come to this house in the forest where the shadows oppress me, and the only water is rain and the tepid taste of the river. We, who are born of the ocean, can never seek solace in rivers. Their flowing runs on like our longing, reproves us our lack of endeavor and purpose, proves that our striving will founder on that. We resent them this wisdom, this freedom, passing us toiling, waiting and watching their cunning declensions down to the sea. But today I would join you, traveling river, borne down the years of your patientest flowing, past pains that would wreck us, sorrows arrest us, hatred that washes us up on the flats, and moving on through the plains that receive us, processioned in tumult, come to the sea. Bright waves splash up from the rocks to refresh us, blue seashells shift in their wake, and there the thatch of the fishermen's houses, the path made of pebbles, and look! Small urchins combing the beaches look up from their traps to salute us. They remember us just as we left them. The fisherman hawking the surf on this side of the reef stands up in his boat and halloos us. A starfish lies in its pool, and gulls, white sails slanted seaward, fly into the limitless morning before us.
When I think of South, I think of going south. What do you think?
I think it's very clear what he's saying is he longs for something opposite to what he has now, which is north. He's gone north to experience whatever it is, Canada, United States, but it is not working out for him. Therefore, what he has there, it's not helping him. He wants the opposite, therefore south. He's going south.
Okay.
Or as you can say, when you said going south, things have gone south, it brings to mind a negative connotation. So things have gone awry, things haven't gone according to plan, and that may be what he's thinking of as well.
Okay, so it definitely seems to be a play on the idea of going south. And then, of course, we look at the fact that lots of birds fly south. They fly to warmth during winter. And maybe this is the sentiment behind why it is called South. All right, now we're going to go into looking at the stanzas. This poem actually is quite a complex poem, and so we're going to look at the stanzas in a kind of a different way this time. And so, Dexter, you Let's look at stanzas 1 and 2.
1 and 2. Well, as I was saying earlier, he switches it up. In stanza 1, he's looking at the warmth of his home islands. He's looking at, and he even starts off by saying, but today I recapture the islands, in that he's taking back what was either taken from him or he lost. He's taking it back. And he's looking at the warmth, the vibrancy of the Caribbeans in stanza 1, as opposed to the very sterile, stone, rigid nature of North, where he has been before. He's contrasting how when he is South, he actually can communicate with people. He's talking about rolling into the fishermen's houses. Whereas in stanza 2, he talks about he's crossed countless saltless savannas. The use of the alliteration there is to emphasize that he feels alone in for lack of a better term, being North. And he's contrasting both North and South. Saltless savannas brings to mind a bland feeling, a bland taste, like when you're comparing Caribbean cooking to that mass-produced, processed nature of everything in those big cities. Bland.
Yeah.
So he's trying to get back to that vibrancy, that flavor that Caribbean culture has.
And this is continued in stanzas 3 and 4. In stanza 3 particularly, he says, we who are born of the ocean can never seek solace in rivers. And what is clear is that he is comparing the culture of the North to rivers, and he's comparing the culture of the South, being the Caribbean, to oceans. And we know immediately there is no comparison between a river and an ocean. The river actually flows into the ocean. But the understanding is that in the culture of the North, there is the go-getter, there is the rat race, there is the constant grind of work, which, according to him in that third stanza, makes those who have left the Caribbean and have gone to the North stand out as being different, because they are unaccustomed to the toiling that the North Americans have within their culture. So when he says basically this: passing us toiling, waiting and watching their cunning declension down to the sea. And this is where, students, there is the complexity, because you'd have to envision the idea of a river and the fact that rivers can be rushing. I don't know if you've ever seen the rapid waters. And the river is one directional, whereas with the sea we have low tide, high tide, we have ebbing and flow of tide. And so when this river, representing North America, goes into the ocean representing the Caribbean, what happens is that it integrates itself, but at the same time it still has a strength within it that makes it almost a master of the ocean. And so in that third stanza, what he's suggesting is that the river has more of a purpose than those persons who would have come from a place that's surrounded by the ocean, because the river's purpose is to go into the ocean and take over. When we look at the fourth stanza, he alludes to the fact that he caught the bug. So he rode along in that same river that he was unaccustomed to, but he used it to return to the Caribbean. And so to me, that fourth stanza reflects the fact that many people would have left the islands to make a better life. They would have accumulated their money, they would have made their achievements, hence the river, and then they would have flowed right back into the Caribbean, back to the place that was familiar, the place that would give them joy. All right, and we have had a history of that. And so in that fourth stanza where he talks about pains that would wreck us, sorrows, arrest us, hatred that washes us up on the flats. He's talking about the fact that before he could get to the place right back into the ocean, he would have had to have gone through all of those periods of discrimination and opposition in the country that he would have adopted as his own before he could actually get back home. All right, so we're going to look now at the last two stanzas.
And the final stanza, he is actually back here. The river has brought him back home to the Caribbean. There's a sense of excitement and wonder, a sense of familiarity. So he's saying there, and you notice there is in italics, like there, he's pointing out is the thatch of fishermen's houses and the path made of pebbles. And then you have that expression, look, and there's that exclamation mark. And it seems as if he's seeing this for the first time again. He's filled with wonder. And people and creatures are welcoming him home. The fisherman is hallooing him, hello, welcoming him back home. And he says even the sea urchins stand up and salute him as he comes back home.
Added to that, you will notice that when he's talking about the Caribbean, it's completely different to when he's talking about North. You never hear him mention anybody when he's talking about the cities. But as soon as he gets back to the Caribbean, the fisherman is there, almost to say that there's a disconnection from humanity or that human quality of being with somebody or being with people when you get immersed into the rat race, the river, that is the hustle and bustle of the cities. He has to get back from that, and when he gets back from it, it is such a complete turnaround that even the sea urchins and the seagulls seem to be welcoming him back to where he needed to be, where he belongs.
Let's look a little bit at the devices, literary devices that are being used throughout, because this is one poem that uses lots of natural imagery, especially imagery of the sea.
There's, as Dexter said in the beginning, there's the contrasting imagery, the bright beaches of the Caribbean, the islands. And then he said, life heaved and breathed in him then, in the strength of that turbulent soil, which is contrasted with the stoniest cities and the saltless savannas and the slanting sleet and hill and the shadows oppressing him. So there's the contrast between imagery of brightness and images of darkness.
In addition to that, Faith, I thought while you were saying it about the effect of the heaved and breathed. It's obviously assonance, but it to me mirrors the idea of the ebb and flow of the tides.
The ocean.
So you can actually see, you can actually feel, or it actually suggests the whole breathing aspect of it, and life that certainly doesn't seem to be there in the second stanza, as you were saying.
Yes.
And the whole alliterative qualities of sharp slanting sleet would suggest that life was extremely difficult. The repetition of that S sound would suggest that it's very unpleasant, and that he basically was finding the whole experience distasteful. Hence the words that he uses, like oppress. He says the shadows oppress him. And he talks about the taste of the river being tepid.
And stoniest cities.
Yes, exactly.
Sojourned in stoniest cities, tepid taste, saltless savannas. I also feel like even in this place that he doesn't belong, he still has that musicality, if you, for lack of a better word, of the Caribbean through him, like Carnival. It's very musical.
Yes.
And even in this isolated place where he's not with his people or with people per se, he still feels that musicality in Caribbean culture, and he's being drawn back to it.
And if we were to look at the tone of the poem, what stands out is that the tone seems to change according to what
Where he
he's
is.
actually talking
Yeah.
about and where he is. Yes, and so we can actually feel the joy in the last two stanzas
Coming home.
because he's coming home. But when we look at the beginning, we can actually see the almost sorrow, the feeling of isolation that he is experiencing as a result of living in a foreign country.
And there's that longing to return to what he knows
I would
in
even
the
go
Caribbean.
as far as to say a little bit of despair, because he says, we who are born of the ocean can never seek solace in rivers, in that no matter what he does, he will never truly 100% belong here because he is almost of another world. And we can never take solace there. So it's a despair in that he's now come to realize it and he has to get back. So
Yes. And the image that we see in the last two lines of the final stanza of the gull with white sails slanted seaward flying into the limitless morning before us, that image is one of freedom.
Yes.
It's like I'm home again and I'm just enjoying the fact that I am home once more.
And you are limitless.
And I am
Nothing
limitless.
Can stop
Nothing
you.
can
You
stop
do
me.
anything.
Precisely. Which is the feeling that I think a lot of us have in the Caribbean, but we don't ever really appreciate it until it's gone. And so certainly this is what Kamau is expressing here. All right, finally, we're going to have a quick look at the form of the poem. As we mentioned before, this poem is a series of contrasts between the north and the south. When we look at it as well, there isn't the usual rhyme scheme at the end. This is also a poem of free verse. What do you think is the effect of the free verse use here?
I think the free verse is done deliberately. He's speaking primarily, I would imagine, in my view, to those who have gone through what he has gone through as well. He wants it to be more personal, or I would think he wants it to be more personal, to those who were born of the ocean and maybe feeling that same despair that he felt and need that same solace of coming back. They will understand. Anybody who's gone away for an extreme amount of time and felt that homesickness will understand. So I think it's free verse to be a bit more personal to those, especially those people who know or can understand where he's coming from.
But then you can almost say that it is free verse in the final two stanzas, because all the other stanzas 1 to 4 are patterned in that they are 6 lines each. And it's only in the last two stanzas that he comes away from that. So as you were saying, he's back home now. There's freedom, as you just said. He's not limited anymore. The possibilities are endless, and that too is reflected in the last two stanzas.
I would say also that the free verse emphasizes the fact that he feels as though he needed to almost like divest himself of all of those experiences to almost, what's the word that we use when the military people have gone on a mission? To be debriefed.
Oh, okay.
It's almost as though he wanted to be debriefed. That seems almost to be what the use of the free verse does here. Finally, we're going to have a look at how this poem fits into all of the other poems that we've been studying for CSEC. I posit that perhaps this poem fits into the theme patriotism.
Yeah, I think it is a love of his country, of his culture, as opposed to anything else. He feels that longing to get back to where he was born, where the ocean, we who are born of the ocean. So it is a definite call back home, a love of country, a patriotism which he cannot find anywhere else.
And then there's also, you can say what you said just now, longing, you can just leave it as longing. There's a desire for some change, and that is so broad that that can be linked to poems like The Woman Speaks to the Man Who Has Employed Her Son. Any poem that where somebody desires something to change and longs for something different, you can link it with.
Yeah. Okay. So having said all of that, students, one of the ways that you can prepare for the exam is to broaden your scope, broaden your horizon. Ensure that you don't just simply see each poem in the box. Understand that sometimes there are linkages that can come that may be unexpected. So you need to make sure that you are prepared to discuss all aspects of the poem. Make sure that when you revise that you look at all of the varying angles, and there are so many of them, and we've just discussed a few. That's it from CSEC Circle.